Hi, everyone. This is Henna Maria. Thank you for tuning in to the Authentic Podcast. This is episode number 2, The Lawful Remedy. Now, when the COVID-19 84 PSYOP kicked off this year, I was overwhelmed with the amount of misinformation, contradiction, conflict, chaos, and perpetual confusion that we were all being bombarded with. I realized very quickly that debating all of these claims separately would siphon far too much of my life force. Therefore, I focused my energy on spreading awareness about what I consider to be the absolute key to reading reality, and that is natural law. Because when one realizes that the way the world works is based on immutable and eternal universal principles, then these deceitful surface narratives just dissolve because they cannot bear the light of truth. And speaking of truth, today I'm very excited to be talking with Rik Parris, a cybernetic polymath, meaning an individual with a very broad spectrum of knowledge, and also a student of natural law and hermetic alchemy. Rik, thank you so much for being my guest.
Thank you very, very much for having me on, Henna. I've really appreciated the connections that we've shared in the conversations we've had, and I'm very much looking forward to what we're going to talk about.
You know, when I found you, I was looking for information about sovereignty and natural law, and I was amazed when I saw that you just literally started making your videos about this content, and I was just like, bingo, I got to reach out to this guy. So why don't we just get into the heart of the matter straight away? And because it's a large topic, and I feel this is something that every single soul on this existence should know about. And this is probably one of the most occulted and obfuscated subjects, actually. So there's a lot for us to go through. So why don't we start off just from the basics? Can you explain to us exactly what is a straw man, also known as the legal fiction?
In broad terms, the straw man it's an intellectual creation. It's not a real thing, something that exists in the realms of law. And straw man it's almost like, I've described it as a sort of a synthetic soul, if you will. The legal fiction itself is something that's created it's not created on your birth, but it's attached to you via your birth certificate. A lot of people, when they're born, they don't realize that there's two separate documents that are created. The first one is your live birth record, and that is recorded at the hospital by the medical staff that sort of deliver the child. And the second one is a paper document that is created as a registration of your birth. Now, the difference between recording, I'm just going to quickly just jot some notes down here because a lot of these things are quite difficult to explain. So the difference between recording and registering is that a record is a historical document. It's a record of historical facts. Something has happened. This living being was born of this mother and this father and delivered in this hospital on this day at this time. That is the record of the birth. Now, a registration is a little bit different because a registration is a legal term. It's not a historical term. And when you register something, you give over the interest you have in that thing to the entity with whom you are registering. Okay? You register your interest. So what that basically means is you are handing over the legal ownership of the thing that is referenced in the registration document without your knowledge to whichever entity you've registered it. So when you register your car with your local government, you know, in the UK it's the DVLA. When you register your car with them, you're signing over the ownership of your car to the government, which is why they can come and steal your car off you if they don't think you're paying taxes or, you know, whatever else. And that's how the police are able to impound your car, because their entity is working for the government. And you've registered your car as being owned by the government. The same thing happens when you register your birth. And that creates this legal straw man. And you will always recognize this being referenced in letters by the all caps version of your name. So I'll write this down for you now, just to give you a visual idea of what I'm talking about. Registration, recording, registering. Right, so there we go. Just a really simple diagram here. Just switch back so you can see me a bit better. So there's two different things going on here. Now, when you're born, the birth of you, this living, breathing human being, is recorded in a historical context. Nobody is trying to claim ownership of anything. All it is a historical record of the birth of that being. The legal side of it is when you register your birth, and that creates this thing called a birth certificate. Okay? And the birth certificate itself is owned by the government entity. You'll notice if you look at your own birth certificate, it is a copy of the certificate. You never get the original. The original is held by the government, and that gives them legal ownership over the entity which is attached to that, the real person. Okay? Now, because this is just a piece of paper, this is just an intellectual idea. It is not real, it is not measurable, it doesn't exist in the world. It's something that has been created by man, not something that has been created by nature. Yes? This was created by nature. This was created by man. This is natural law. This is the legal system and maritime law. Okay? Now, you'll always see the legal straw man referenced in documents. So if you get a letter with all caps for me, Rik Parris, it's in all caps, you know it is talking about that legal fiction. It's not talking about the sovereign you, the real actual person. Yeah. If you think about it, when you write a letter to someone, you don't spell their name out in all capitals because you're trying to talk to a living person. When you receive a document, so demand to go to court or demands for payment, they're always listed with your bold all caps person, legal person, that's straw man. My birth certificate at the moment is owned by UK PLC, the Corporation of the United Kingdom, not the sovereign legal government, not the sovereign lawful government, because our sovereign lawful government isn't in session. We, the people, have not brought it into session, and we have not been in session for hundreds of years, possibly thousands of years. But the legal corporation of the United Kingdom owns my birth certificate and therefore owns the interest over that entity, all caps Rik Parris. Because I am an employee, I'm an asset of their corporation, they can impose their own corporate policy on me because I have agreed to be part of that corporation. And that's basically what the legal straw man is. It's saying, to cut a long story short, and it's much more complex than this. I'm no lawyer. Let me just put this down on paper. If I have a specialist area as a polymath, it's science and the spirituality that comes out of that science. But I'm not a lawyer. I have enough understanding to figure out how it works without necessarily having to know the intricate details, so to speak. I could draw you a diagram. I probably couldn't use the right terms, but I could draw you a diagram that would explain it. And basically, this fictional entity is something that you have been convinced you are. Your whole life, you've been convinced that you are this entity that is owned by the government and is subject to its corporate powers over you as an employee of the corporation.
Right. So that, like, the system that we are owned by, or not us, but that which we think is us, which is our identification.
Yeah.
We don't realize that there is another way. We have no idea that we've been basically tricked into being a dead entity, a corporation, or part of this corporation.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's exactly that. It's exactly that.
So because we sign our names in these documents and we keep reinforcing this belief, by always signing on these documents with the straw man, with the all caps name, we are continuously renewing the contract with this corporation by basically acknowledging that the straw man is myself, meaning I am a dead entity.
Yes, it's exactly that. And the way they do it is really, really sneaky. This is coming into maritime law. Do you mind if I just talk a little bit about maritime
that was
law?
actually going to be my next question. What is the difference between the law of the land and the law of the sea? Because, a lot of people are aware of the law and they think that means the justice system as it stands, but they don't realize that there are actually several different levels to this. And what is referenced as the law to us as citizens is this maritime law that you're now going to explain to us about. This is brilliant. People, please pay attention, because this is a key to your liberation.
You are very right, Henna. And this is the big frauds that have been, and the lies that have been inflicted on us since birth. And if you really want to understand this, it's going to, quite honestly, take an awful lot of processing. You're going to have to learn how to completely rethink the way you have been taught to think, because since your birth, the whole system has been built around perpetuating this very lie that I'm about to point out to you right now. So it's really, really important for us to understand the difference between natural law and common law and maritime law. There is actually another one, which I'm going to touch on very, very briefly, but the way it operates is very similar to maritime law anyway. It's just a different entity that's manipulating that, and that's air law as well. There is the laws of the air, which is where the Vatican, I believe, starts to come into play. I'm prepared to be corrected on that, but I believe that's where the influence of religious entities starts to come into play. But you've got, at the top, above everything else, is natural law. And this is what I describe as a law that is emergent, law that needed no creation by man, that man has merely discovered. So these are the equations you can write down as a mathematician, and you can calculate something that is then proven by your experiments, yeah? So thinking about things like Einstein's most beautiful equation ever, which I've actually got plans to do a video on, is E equals mc squared. That gives you provable fact. The numbers were already there. The maths was already present there in nature. Man has just discovered it and found it. Even if Einstein hadn't written E equals mc squared, the truism of that equation would still be there. And that is the intelligence in the system that I talked about on my channel, the ghost in the machine. That is what I talk about when I'm talking about God, is that intrinsic intelligence that is just there in nature, that self-organizes, that fills niches, that provides life everywhere. It's those laws on the way the world operates that is the true natural law.
And
so, I mean, on a basic level,
that govern as well what we see in the visible world. For example, light, gravity, all of these things that we are all aware of that are immutable, that we can't avoid these laws being applied to us as we are here in this plane. But in terms of natural law, there's also a higher level, right, which is the governance of our consciousness and morality. And so natural law encompasses everything about existence, all the principalities that are creating our experience, this reality.
Mm-hmm. Human beings aren't operating on natural law at the minute. We've been immersed in the game of Monopoly, where we are encouraged to be as ruthless as possible to each other in order to prove our self-worth by making money and by having power. And that is not the way the world works. The lion does not go and hunt as many antelope as he possibly can to prove that he's better than all the other lions.
Yeah, absolutely.
He goes and eats when he's hungry.
That's it. There's an intrinsic sense of harmony in everything that is natural, but we have somehow been taken out of that context into this other way of functioning, this kind of machine mind, if you will.
Yes, yes. So that's the sort of the basis of natural law. Now, when you get to common law is a creation of man. But what it is it's a codification of natural law as we understand it and apply it to our own society, so to speak. So there is the laws are arranged in such a way that it allows enough flexibility for human beings to try new things and to discover new ways of operating and more efficient ways of doing things, and it allows us to, like nature does, to learn how to fill as many different niches on this planet as possible. We want to try and spread our influence, which, when channeled properly, is divine and uplifting to the world, which makes the world better, not makes it worse, who brings order where there is chaos. And common law allows that. So there are three basic tenets to common law. And, you can redefine this and expand on this in many different ways. But what it basically comes down to is freedom of movement. For number one, anyone should never be restricted from moving or living anywhere, provided they accept three basic tenets, which is cause no harm, you cause no loss, and you operate in truth.
Simple.
That's
I love that.
And that is honestly as simple as it gets. And the idea there is that any details where there might be some argument to be had either way, that is where a court comes into play. That is where a court of lawful people who are Joe Public, just like you or me, anybody with the desire to help, in the serving of justice, will decide on the details of that. So every other possible crime that you can imagine, which is codified in disgusting amounts of detail in the legal system to create these ridiculous, convoluted loopholes where the only people who actually think they understand the law don't, the lawyers who don't actually really understand the law, because it's such a big, massive mess and a web that it's very difficult for any individual person to understand that.
Rik, may I just ask a question to clarify? Is common law the same as the law of the land?
Yes. Common law, yes. I will, put that down as well, land law. They are the same thing. Common law is also known as land and soil law, is another term that you'll hear it under. But yeah, it is the law of the land. It's the law of reality. But, it's based on the basic tenets that we see in the way the world works, the way the universe works. We're just putting that in intellectual terms because we're intellectual animals, and we need to have that structure that we can verbally teach to people, so to speak. And this has been almost, as common law, land law, has been almost completely erased because, again, coming back to Darwinism, people have been convinced that we need these ridiculous levels of detail to everything that's going on in terms of this massive monstrosity of a legal structure that nobody really understands anymore, when in reality, anyone with a bit of common sense and a decent sense of morality can extrapolate from cause no harm, cause no loss, and be truthful to every other possible way of behaving. All you need to say is, in any situation, am I causing harm to anybody? Am I causing loss to anybody? Or am I lying to anybody? And as long as you're not doing those three things, anything that you do is lawful.
Yeah. And I love that, if we think that we're operating on common sense, just the etymological root of that is conscience. Together. So common sense is something that's actually written in the fibers of our consciousness. It's that voice of conscience is common sense. So this law is natural because we all know it. We actually, if we're not totally disconnected from our heart, wisdom, and our consciousness, we have a guidance inside, an inner voice. And basically that is what the law of the land, that common law is all about, is conscience, common sense, right?
Yes, it is. It is exactly that.
So it doesn't take a scholar to know right from wrong or truth from lie.
No.
It's something that, you know, we all know, actually.
Every conscious being in the universe understands the difference between right and wrong. Every single conscious being does. It's immutable.
Yeah.
There's the way the universe works, and if we're not living in line with that, then you're not being truthful.
Absolutely, and that's what I love about this natural law, is because, you know, we've been somehow duped to believe that you need all this years of indoctrination and all these, you know, titles after your name to be able to comprehend things. But that's where I see that's the system of deceit, is that it doesn't need to be this kind of monstrosity with all, like they say, the devil is in the details. So why don't we go back into the basics of how the world works, you know, how the reality is created? That's natural law, and boom, you know, there's clarity.
Exactly. And people are scared that once we start living under natural law, that we will go back to this bizarre sort of medieval kind of existence where people, and that's not how it works. That's not how it works. In fact, when you look into the real history, the people of the deep past were far more advanced than the people of the Middle Ages, of you know, the Dark Ages. That was a down step, and we've arguably in our sort of true quality of life as is worse now than it has ever been in thousands of years. Oh, yeah. We're enslaved in a way we've never been enslaved before, and most people aren't even aware of the cage, and even if they are actually aware of it, they're quite happy to be in it, which is the, you know, the biggest problem. So maritime law is the law of the sea, and the reason it's unique from land law is when you are on the high seas, you are not under the jurisdiction of any land entity. So you're not then on land law. And the captain of the ship has to be the monarch and the judge and the bishop and every possible authority figure in one. When you look into the powers that a captain has on board his own vessel, it's very interesting. And they're basically God, in a sense, of their own lands, in that they have absolute power over everything. You know, they could lock anybody up in the brig, they can marry people if they want to get married. There's all sorts of powers that they have. So what the straw man and then sort of maritime law is doing is it's defining that all caps title or the corporation, so in my case, United Kingdom PLC or the Crown Incorporated, as being a trading vessel, a ship. They're using legal language, maritime law language, to define living things and physical things as not being where they are. So the legal straw man, all caps Rik Parris, is a trading vessel that has been salvaged from the sea by United Kingdom PLC. And there, the way salvage law works is it is based on claim and counterclaim. They have claimed to have found your vessel absent of any owner in the sea. Yeah, this is exactly what they've done. And they have salvaged that vessel and claimed ownership over it. Now, in salvage law, the actual owner of any salvaged vessel can show up at any point, prove that they own that vessel, and is then entitled to take it back.
Right, right. And this is what we're not aware of. We're not aware that we were salvaged.
We didn't know that. That's exactly
we didn't know that we were floating in the sea. So
no. So that's how they've used maritime salvage law. And where most people in the United Kingdom think they are existing on the island of Great Britain, they're actually, in legal terms, existing as a salvaged vessel that is under the ownership of the corporation, the trading vessel of United Kingdom Incorporated. So we're actually defined as being lost at sea in maritime law, not on the actual shore. And in legal terms, because we have not refuted this, they can drag you in front of one of their legal courts and string you up for whatever offence that the corporate entity that owns your vessel dreams up.
Wow.
And there's nothing you can do about it. Unless you claim your trading vessel back, then it's always going to be under whatever regulations the corporation which owns it has decided they want to have it under.
I mean, the genius of who conjured this system up is just, I must say, wow.
A lot of people will say as well, why have they made it so complicated? Why have they made it so complicated? And why have they left a way out? Why have they left a way out? Well, because why do you think these people never actually go to prison for the things that they do? Why are all their court cases always shut door with no media? Because when they're dragged in front of a court, they will refute their own legal name and prove that they have ownership of it and prove that they are not subject to the legal system which is trying to try them, and they will walk out.
Wow.
And in order for them to be able to do that, in order for them to do that, they have had to leave that door open for us. That's how they get away with all the evil things that they get away with, because the moment we ever try and bring them in front of one of their legal courts, in one of their legal systems, we're going to lose, because we're in a rigged game and we don't even realize that we're in a rigged game.
So what's lacking is a sovereign court where we could then try these individuals who are breaking natural law and the law of the land. So this is non-existent.
Exactly.
What you started out with that we don't have right now.
The important thing to remember is this is how it is structured. Natural law, everybody is subject to. You're not going to be able to stop yourself getting struck by a bolt of lightning if nature decides you're going to get struck by a bolt of lightning. Yeah, that is supreme power over all. Common law derives directly from natural law, and because of that, it is above maritime law. Because as long as we aren't actually on the sea, we are not subject to that maritime law. And the problem here is that we've been convinced that we are this piece of paper entity, this salvaged trading vessel, which is owned under maritime law by your corporation government, which is not the real government of your country. It is a corporation which is masquerading as your government.
Wow.
And look, if you don't believe me, go and look. Don't take my word for it. Go and look. There are plenty of people who've been speaking about this for years, and a lot of them have been suicided, and a lot of them have been made so miserable that they're unable to continue their existence. People have been evicted. People have been imprisoned. They will try everything they can to get anybody who gets even near this shut down, however they can do it. So it's important that we all take time to go and come to our own awareness of exactly what is going on here. Because like you say, we do need a common law courts, and we actually do have some common law courts of varying levels of effectiveness run by varying different people in the UK at the moment. Part of my goal here is to try and sort of bring everybody under one big umbrella, because the only thing that is more powerful than the government putting control, if we're going into the real common law here, monarchs and government entities used to be put in place by the people. And if you look thousands of years ago, in Britain, you're looking sort of 2,000 years ago, the way the country was run was that the monarch was serving at the pleasure of the people. It was a gift to the monarch to be able to be in that position, and it would be a position of responsibility. It was a great thing to undertake, and the people appreciated this person for taking on that responsibility. But because of self-sovereignty, which I'm going to touch on now, is when you are a sovereign being, a real living person, and you are not a corporation, a limited liability corporation, where you're not directly responsible for the things that your corporation does. Yeah. Here's the difference between sovereign living person and corporate entity. Sovereign living person willingly does something that causes 2,000 people to be killed or 2,000 people to die. That person's going to go to prison. Yeah. Head of a corporation does something that means 2,000 people who are buying something from his corporation or using a service of his corporation, if that corporate CEO decides to do something knowing that 2,000 people are going to suffer because of it, he doesn't go to jail. The company gets a fine.
Yeah.
Because he is operating with this shield umbrella. I'm not me, I'm operating on behalf of the corporation. The corporation has to be held responsible for this. And if you really want to understand how nasty corporations are, they're psychopathic entities with the same status as human beings, okay? So you put the sovereign birth certificate, if you put the birth certificate next to a corporation, in legal terms, they are on exactly the same standing. The only difference is if a legal person does something wrong, the police can come and arrest them, take them to jail. If a corporation does something wrong, where's the body? It's a birth certificate without a body. There's no one person attached to it, so no one person can ever be held accountable for it. And there's a great documentary called The Corporation. I recommend everybody who's interested in this goes and actually understands what a corporation actually is, and the monster that was created when they were allowed to have the same rights as you or I, legal people with actual living bodies that can be held accountable. That was one of the biggest steps to sort of things taking the spiral into infinite madness that we're experiencing right now.
Yeah. So this is obviously a very large topic. But what would you say, Rik, in terms of those of us who know that this is the direction where we want to be going? We want to empower ourselves and reclaim our sacred land and become standing sovereigns. How do we do that? Is there something we can do straight away, some steps on our way, aside from obviously learning about this, but what kind of, a lot of people, when I talk about this, they ask, how is it done? So could you give just like a basic rundown of the kind of things that one would have to go through in order to become a sovereign?
As best as I can. I can only really go off the examples that I have seen starting to happen in the world, because there are real examples of this actually starting to happen. And I recommend anybody interested look at what Anna von Reitz is doing in America right now, because that is the kind of template for where we've got to go. So there's three big things that need to happen. One is that people need to reclaim, they need to refute this salvage right that has been pushed upon them. They need to say, that is not your trading vessel, that is my trading vessel. That is my legal entity, because your name exists separate from you. Even if I didn't have a name, I would still be this thing. I would still have this consciousness, I would still have everything else that I possess. I just wouldn't possess a way of interacting with the world. And your good name is your reputation. That's what it is. That's all it is. That's how you know what to attach to me. That's how you know that this living person here is a good person, because I'm attached to that name, Rik. And that is how you identify me as a unique being in the world, right? You identify me by my name. I am not my name, but I'm identified by my name. And that is what you use to trade with other human beings. And trade, people think a lot of money terms, but trade is not money. Trade is any exchange of information or energy. That's all it is. It's an exchange of information or energy. So we are engaging in trade right now. I am giving things to you, you are taking them, and then you are giving things back to me. And that is an energy information exchange. That is trade. And the reason I know who you are is you're identified by your name, Henna Maria. Yeah? Yeah. So we need to take that vessel, that legal entity, and bring it onto the land and bring it into common law and natural law. And the way you do this is you have to get either your birth certificate or your live birth record. Number one, get hold of that document. Live birth record is better, but a copy of your birth certificate will do just fine, because they both reference the day of your birth, the day you were actually brought into being on this planet. Then you get signed witness copies of two different people who will say, I know that living person standing in front of me is the entity that has been recorded as being born on this date. I know you, the flesh person, are the entity referenced by that document. So that's proof of connection to the birth certificate. Then, because you were born on a day at a given time, the day of your birth, and the birth certificate, the legal fraud, was created after that fact, you have time precedence over any claim of the government because you existed before the birth certificate existed.
Brilliant.
And the moment you prove that you, the living person, are the owner of that name and that you existed before that name existed, then you've now reclaimed that trading vessel. And there's a very specific, you don't even need to actually inform the government, but there is a very specific set of instructions you would have to give to a judge were you brought in front of their legal courts. And it's not that complicated. I'll see if I can find the actual PDF document on Anna von Reitz's website, but she's got it down to a series of 4 affirmations that you make in court. And the judge will look at you very confused because he's never seen this done before in front of his eyes, and he'll scratch his head and he'll go, "Can I have a look at that?" And they'll take it off and there'll be a lot of shuffling and a bit of blah, and they'll give it back to you. But then at that point, you literally turn around and walk out because you're refusing to be subject to that system. So if you choose to be part of a club, you would be expected to behave in terms of the policy of that club. If you're part of an association, you would choose to be part of that group and choose to abide by their rules. It's like the terms and conditions of service on, anything that you're choosing to use that platform, therefore you're choosing to, behave in a certain manner. So the moment that you do that in a courtroom, they've got absolutely no power over you because you say, I never agreed to be part of this system. I never signed on a dotted line to say that I was part of this system. And all you've ever done is assume that I'm part of that system. And until now, I was too stupid to realize that I could just say no.
I'm just buzzing from the vision of like all of us, like this massive tidal wave of awakening and consciousness and people beginning to claim their sovereignty. Like, what world could we create?
People have got this bizarre idea that we need to actually inform them, the hierarchy enslaving mankind, yeah? They think that, most people think we need to inform them of it for some reason, and we don't. Because our law stands above their law. They've just spent their whole lives trying to convince us that our law didn't exist in the first place and that it's not real, when it is. And if you dig actually into the history, in whatever country that you live, you'll find it there. You'll find the footsteps of where they started convincing people that they were below the government when they're not. The voice of the people, the voice of the country, the voice of the world is above any other man-made authority. And this is written in ancient laws and has been for thousands of years. The second thing we do need to do is that in the absence of a legitimate government, we need to create our own. So real people need to start meeting up digitally or in person, however they want to structure that. But these lawful people who have reclaimed their sovereignty and not only said, I am outside your system, but I am personally responsible for all my actions now, and I'm not going to ever hide behind anything. It's a big, I call it growing up, because that's what we're doing. We're growing up, we're saying bye to the parents, the abusive parents, that have been beating us and robbing us and poisoning us for thousands of years. We're walking away from that abusive household and we're being our own grown-ups and our own adults.
Yeah.
And that's the other bit that people forget about sovereignty. It's not just about getting your own way and finding a way of tricking your parents, but still living in their house. It's about moving out. We've got to move out.
Yeah.
If we don't move out, then we're not being true adults. We're scamming our parents, and that's just as bad as the other way around and leads to nothing actually getting any better. So real people need to make their real own governments. They need to gather together at, a county level, a city level, a state level, whatever level that they can do it and say, okay, we are now the lawful people of the world. and we are going to shut down these entities. And the way you shut them down is first by stepping outside their system, and that is, you know, reclaiming your straw man. But it's also then very important that we start using our own money, because the currency system, which is a big mess for another talk, but what it basically is, as long as it's controlled by them, they're always going to be able to suck our energy away from us. It's like the lifeblood of trade. It's the blood in the veins of the way society interacts with itself, so to speak. And as long as we're still using their monetary system, we will always be feeding that beast. We will still be giving our arm over to the vampire.
Yeah, that's a brilliant
and that is the third and most important thing, is that, you know, after we've claimed our sovereignty and after we've created our own lawful government, which stands above the corporate government, we also then need to create our own currency. And that's not to say that we'd suddenly stop using the awful money, because that wouldn't work. You know, I couldn't just stop using money tomorrow and only train in lawful Rik hours or whatever currency I wanted to use. We all have to come to something that we agree on. As awakened people who accept the world needs to change, we need to come to a single tradable currency, at least within our local areas, if not on a, you know, a planetary scale, to allow us then to support each other. So we're not then giving our energy to the system. Lawful people trade with lawful money wherever they can. And if they can't trade with lawful money, then yeah, you know, maybe you'll go and, you know, interact with their system on whatever minimal way you need to survive. But the more people come out of it and the more people that start being part of this mutually supportive network, the less blood the vampires get and the weaker they get, and the more people join us, and it becomes this swing from one way to the other. And eventually we get to the point where the parasites are going to be left with two choices. They either step off that legal trading vessel and accept themselves as being lawful land beings, or they starve. Because these people don't grow their own food. They don't actually do any real work in the world. They live by siphoning everybody else's work.
Yeah,
They don't have the skill set to survive on their own. They need us. And the moment they then step onto our lawful land, we walk them into our lawful court, and they pay for their crimes.
Yeah.
So yeah, some will take the coward's way out. Some will go and hang themselves or shoot themselves or whatever else. But you know, a lot of them will have to come and face us. And the other thing we're going to have to be prepared to do is forgive. We're going to have to be prepared to forgive an awful lot of people, because so many people are part of this sick system, and they're only doing what they're doing because they think that's the only way. They're ignorant. And these people, when they realize exactly what they've been part of, they're going to be broken. They're going to be psychologically and emotionally distraught because of realizing what it is that they've been part of willingly.
Yeah.
So there's going to need to be a lot of forgiveness, and a lot of these lawful courts are just going to have to say, look, we know that you're in an awful position. You didn't know what else you could do. I mean, could we blame you? I mean, I don't know about you, but for years I just tried my best to just get by and hope that people would awaken on their own and just talk to people about things. But comes a time when you've got to just take responsibility for it and say, you know what, personal cost is something I need to put to one side now, because this is bigger than me. This is about my girlfriend's kids and all the kids I used to teach swimming for, and you know, my eventual children. If I don't do something now, if I don't start trying to bring people together, you know, whatever your opinion on the details are, they don't matter. You know, if you think the Earth's flat, fine. Do you accept that the monetary system is screwed and we need to get rid of this government? Yeah, right, brilliant. Come on then. Forget all the other shit. Pardon my French. Forget all the other rubbish. Forget anything else. It's all a distraction. Do you want the world to change? Do you think the government's corrupt? Do you think we need to change the monetary system? If I can agree with you on those three things, I don't care whatever else you think. We'll figure that out later. Let's get rid of the lies. Let's get rid of the nonsense. Let's just grow up.
Yeah.
Stop saying it's because he told me so. That's what this, oh, I do it because the government told me to. Well, if the government told you to jump off a cliff, would you do it? Oh, I know some people would, you know, from what I'm seeing in the world, I'm fairly sure some people would do it without even thinking. But I don't know about you, but when I was brought up, that excuse, oh, so-and-so told me to do it, when I'd done something wrong, that didn't wash.
No way.
My mom. Well, that's what people are bleating to each other now. Oh, I'm doing it because they told me to do it.
Yeah.
Stop being an infant. Grow. Just grow up. We don't need other people to tell us how to behave. We know how to behave. We're grown-ups. Let's start acting like it.
Bam! Truth bomb after truth bomb, Rik. I'm loving this. But that's exactly what I'm talking about as well, is spiritual adulthood and the realization that freedom is the ultimate responsibility. When you think of freedom, people think of anarchy, and anarchy, of course, means without rulers, without control. It doesn't mean without rules.
People think chaos, don't they?
People think chaos, because that's part of the brainwashing of this, you know, Luciferian parasitic system that we're under, because we're under the spell of believing that they own us when they don't, obviously, what we've been talking about today. But, you know, that's the idea, is that we come to see that when we are free, we get to express our true nature. And I know in my heart that the true nature of humanity is that of compassion. We are compassionate beings. We are wise, incredibly intelligent, luminous beings. And we don't get to express that because we've been enslaved for eons. But I feel that this whole COVID psyop is the storm that is actually now, if we take it the right way, it's providing us the opportunity to shake all the existing structures that are based on fraud, shake them up like a hurricane, and just come to see the reality, and then begin to build new.
Yes, definitely. And it's ever more important now that we actually start creating that system of our own. Because the last thing we want to happen is for us to not have a safety net for these people who just want out of this system. Because if they get too big and they don't realize what the path is to get out of this, and they go around destroying and looting and trashing this whole planet, then we've lost valuable infrastructure. If we do it the way I've been saying, where we create our own money, we create our own government, and we just do our own thing, and if they try and stop us, we show them that they can't stop us because we know their law better than they do, and we walk out of their court and we carry on doing what we're doing, then eventually every single piece of infrastructure that has been claimed by these pirates, these corporate maritime law pirates, because that's what they are, will be just ours to reclaim because they are on our sovereign land. All those power lines that are, you know, throwing electricity, all right, well, they're ours now. That power grid, that's ours now. That water system, that's ours now. And we're going to go in there and we're going to take the fluoridators out of there, and we're going to change the way we handle our sewage, because we know we're drinking toilet paper at the moment. So we're going to get rid of that and we're going to sort that out. And we can then, once we've claimed it for our own, we'll go and fix it. And people say, well, who will do it? Well, the people who care about it will do it. The people who are interested in it will do it. Because that's the way humanity has always worked. That's how all innovation has ever come about, because people who cared about it and people who were interested in it have gone and done it. Yeah. They've gone off their own back and gone and done it. Yeah, and when something becomes a problem, you've got no choice but to fix it. Fix it or bin it. That's your options. And this bizarre idea that we can't function without mum and dad watching us all the time.
Yeah, this bizarre idea that we're just going to wreck the place and be some kind of like foaming rabies animals that are just going to just like devour each other. It's like, no, we're actually kind, like most of us are kind, caring, decent beings who just want what's best. We just want to be left to live and enjoy life, do our own thing, do what we care about, care for our families. I mean, I'm sure 99.9% of everybody can agree on these basic principles, basic values of life.
And that's the beauty of common law, is that it boils down to very simple concepts that everybody, regardless of your personal political leanings, spiritual leanings, or otherwise, cannot deny that those three basic concepts are what forms the basis of everything. And if we just keep it as simple as that, you know, there's no argument to be had anymore. Anything else is semantics, and everything else will be figured out by the natural competition and evolution that happens in nature anyway. You'll get lots of different people trying things different ways, but the one that works the best is the one that's going to survive. And this is the false Darwinism. When people call Darwinism, they always use this phrase, survival of the fittest, as if it's the most brutish, ruthless entity that wins over in the end. No, it's not the one with the biggest stick. Stop being a child. It's not the one with the biggest stick that wins. It's the smartest one and the one most adaptable, the most willing to change the way they're behaving to fit a given circumstance. And that is what evolution is. When Darwin said fit, he didn't mean physically fit and brutishly powerful in that masculine kind of way. He meant fit in the way a jigsaw piece fits into a puzzle.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest lie. That is the lie that this whole brutish competition system has been built upon.
Yeah.
The idea that left to our own devices, we will beat each other to death, and we won't. The barbarian might pillage the field, but then when all the grain's gone, who's going to grow his food for him?
That's it. It's like the idea that, you know, the order of nature is based on whoever's like the most bloodthirsty predator is the winner. It's not how it works. It's all about harmony and creativity. Mm-hmm. That's what it's all about. And when I see people, you know, being free to do what they want, they just blossom, you know, that's what I feel that in our human family will happen if we just give ourselves the tools, the necessary occulted knowledge, you know, the truth that has been hidden from us. It doesn't take a lot for us to actually begin to transform our societies.
No, and it all does just come down to that self-sovereignty, not just walking away from it, but actually organising ourselves. Because the reason these people have organised and ruled over us is because we've not done it ourselves. And that's all we need to do. We just need to start doing it ourselves and taking personal responsibility for the way the world works. If we want change, we've got to instigate it. We can't wait for some fairy god politician to do it for us. We can't wait for some messiah to turn up and do it for us. I mean, taking the sort of a Christian angle on this, you know, despite not being a Christian in the way I identify, we are the children of God. We, not one person, us, all of us.
Totally. Well, Rik, I'd love to hear what led you, just to give people an idea, like what awakening to truth and what awakening to your true nature can feel like. Why did you begin to seek the truth? What led you to learn about natural law?
Well, I mean, that's quite an interesting one, because I think I've always been a follower of natural law. But I didn't even realise it at the time, because I didn't really understand what natural law was. And the first time I encountered the phrase natural law was maybe 10 years ago. There was a vegan girl that I used to work with, who I'm still in sporadic touch with, who pointed me to a couple of videos about a few people talking about the nature of corporations and the fact that all our police forces are corporations and the fact that all of our governments are corporations, and every entity you can think of. If you go on Companies House, which is the corporation registration place in the United Kingdom, you go on Companies House, you can find any supposedly political entity, charitable entity, that all listed as corporations. And that kind of got me thinking about a lot of the way things were going on. But because natural law is that base laws of the world, I've always been looking at the world to try and figure out how it works, because something always said to me that we're being lied to. Something inside me told me there was some greater mystery to be discovered besides what was there on the surface. And the first thing that started me truth-seeking, I suppose, was the September 11 bombings. that was when I first kind of got a big, whoa. I remember sitting there and watching it and thinking, it's like a film. There's something unreal about what I'm seeing. I couldn't quite, and I'd watched plenty of disasters. I used to love documentaries on natural disasters, and I'd seen all this sort of news footage on destruction on massive scales before, and something about what I was watching just didn't feel right. I got that little red flag inside that was going, something not right here, Rik. And what it was about was being willing to follow the truth wherever it led, however obscure the connection seemed to be. It was being willing to follow that trail wherever it led. And it took me through religion and hidden spirituality and hidden science and to politics and finance, and then back to politics and back to finance and back to science again. And it's all over the place. And you've got to be willing to step outside your comfort zone a little bit and go, all right, so I don't know that much about economics, but I'll try and understand it on some level, at least get a vague idea of what's going on to whatever level I can. And when my brain starts to spin, I'll step out of it for a bit and I'll go somewhere else and I'll try and understand that to whatever level required. And it's been that willingness, I think, to follow the money and follow the evidence. But more recently, I had another sort of profound shift. And it's important to remember there's never going to be one shift. This is a cyclical thing. This will happen to you again and again and again and again. As long as you keep seeking truth, you will keep experiencing these shifts, and it will take your life in a completely different direction every time it happens. And the main thing is to be aware that that's going to happen at some point and being willing to follow that energy wherever it leads you. The first thing that happens when you experience this shift is you will go through a phase of darkness. I'm being completely brutally honest with you. You will go through a period of utter despair, and it'll be awful. It is a really, really horrible thing to happen, because your whole world has just been flipped around. Your whole understanding of the way things happen has been changed and been shifted, and you've got to learn to readjust yourself. And that initial surrender to that is very important. Don't fight it. When you feel that despair, that utter loss, and the great pain that comes with it, don't dismiss it. Embrace it and go with it and let it flow through you, because when you come out the other side of it, there will be a great clarity, and you will feel an immense relief at living in a way that is closely or more closely aligned to your true divine self. And it's that willingness to embrace that is very, very important. I like to say that sometimes if you want to see where the candle is, you've got to turn the light off. And it's only in the deepest darkness that you can see the light at the end of the tunnel. In a room that is too filled with brightness, you can't see the light that's further away. And sometimes you've got to be willing to let that light go out and fall into that dark place in order to then find your way to a new place of light. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. It's like it to the experience of birth. You know, you are coming into another plane of existence, another plane of consciousness, because if we are not willing to go through that destructive experience of letting the old false beliefs, crumble and die, then we're not able to rise to the higher level. I think of like a hot air balloon. To go higher, you need to drop the baggage. And so the baggage has been just like piled upon us, into our minds, and the truth of the reality has been so obfuscated that it needs to be a destructive process of removing and death of the old to give space for the birth of the new.
And this sort of brings me full circle to the Hermeticism and alchemy, because alchemy, at its essence, is not the transmutation of lead into gold in terms of the physical ideas that a lot of people think of. It's not about trying to make gold out of base metals. What it's about is understanding the natural law of things and learning how to apply them to yourself, and learning how to use natural law to change the world in whatever way you will it to happen. It's about learning to apply your divine will in the world via natural law, and that's a process known as transmutation. So you take something that is dark and you turn it into light. Taking your hot air balloon example, I was struck by an idea when you were talking about it. It's about throwing that baggage off. But you've got to remember, when you throw that baggage off, that acceleration up is going to be terrifying. You're going to feel like it's never going to stop. You're going to get that utter terror of being shot upwards, and that will be a scary experience at first. But as you get used to it, and as you become acclimatized to it, and as you start to see the world from that higher perspective again, you'll have this moment of great beauty again.
Yeah.
And you'll still have some baggage there, and it's important to remember you've still got a bit of baggage. You can still go higher.
Yeah.
But you've got to get used to where you are first. You've got to get acclimatized to that. You've got to get comfortable with living in that space. And then, expect that later on, if you're really willing to keep pushing this and take this as far as reality will allow you, you're going to have another one of those moments where that utter terror when you let go of that baggage and you get rocketed ever higher into the sky over and over and over again.
Yeah.
The 9/11 thing for me was a really big kick that took me years to process, at least 10 years before I started to process that. Then I got another awakening, which was a little bit more minor or so, maybe 5 years ago. And then, the most recent events, which have, been just as terrifying as that original realization that we're being lied to on a vast scale.
Yeah. So I suppose like the comfort in all of this realization of the level and the depth of the fraud that is happening on every aspect of our lives in terms of, the systems that are in place, whether it's the education system, the medical system, the banking system, the governance, all of these institutions and agencies. What can give us comfort in that is that to know that the knowledge of the deceit is our tool for liberation.
Yes.
So unless we become aware of this, there's no way we will ever get out of this slavery. And also to know that there is people like yourself, Rik, and myself, who are here to support people in this process. Yeah. And we are doing the best we can to empower people to create their local micro communities where you're not alone. You're not the black sheep of the family who everyone thinks is just an absolute delusional conspiracy theorist who nobody wants to talk to anymore. Like we've all been there. We've all lost some people in our lives. But guess what? You get incredible, amazing, heart-centered, intelligent, beautiful people in your lives, even if you do lose, some of those. Mm-hmm. And let's hope they will come back. As the fraud gets exposed more and more, I feel more and more of those people who were so quick to dismiss it and call us crazy are beginning to see, wait a minute, maybe there was some sense to what they were saying after all. And then we can again practice forgiveness and say, yes, please come back into my life. I've loved you all along.
Yeah, exactly. We've got to have that. And this is an important thing. Let's just imagine, right, that this is my knowledge of everything that's going on. I can point there and say, yeah, this is my knowledge. Great, that, isn't it? That's really cool, that knowledge, isn't it? I've got it. That's mine, that knowledge. But what use is it? It's only use if I do something with it. Mm-hmm. Because now that knowledge has gone to practical use. It's all well and good understanding what's going on, but if you leave it like a trophy on a shelf that never gets used, then you're as bad as the people who are sitting there and doing nothing and aren't even aware of that knowledge that you've got. That knowledge has to become a hammer. It has to become a spade. It has to become a tool that you use and you enact that will upon the world. Otherwise, it's just knowledge, and knowledge is up here. It's not real. It's only real when it comes into being and it's manifested into reality. And we've got to be willing to take that knowledge now and use it. To be brave, because the first of us out who are going to stick our head above the parapet on this, you'd better bet that they will do everything they can to shut us down. And they will try and ridicule us if they can. And they'll try and make us out to be terrorists or lunatics, or they will bribe us. They will do everything in their power to steer this their way and to control it their way. So we've got to stand true in that knowledge that only real lawful people can work together. And if that person can't prove to you that they are, on paper, that unique living being, that real entity attached to that name, and that they are willing to take all responsibility for anything done in that name, then you can't work with them. And we've got to be standing strong on that.
Yeah.
The reason I promote a lot of what Anna von Reitz is doing at the moment is because she has her own servers now, where on our own servers that are owned by us, not by Google Corp or some other corporate entity, she's recording the names and unique living being numbers of sovereign Americans at the moment. And we need that on our own infrastructure so that we can say with truth, I know I can work with this person because I know they've accepted responsibility for who they are. I know that they are not pretending to be this legal vessel anymore. I know they are operating under lawful land law, the same as me. And because of that, I can work with them and I can trust them. And that trust network is very important. And that's what the lawful bank thing is. That is real people who are saying, we are doing something about this. This is what I'm doing. This is what I'm doing, and I'm going to show you, and this is how I think it's going to help make the world better for us.
So lawfulbank.org or
.com.
Lawfulbank.com. Great.
Yeah. It's just normal. It's not a bank. It's not a bank. Let me just say this. It's not a bank. It's a knowledge bank. It's a bank of real people. It's a collection of people who are willing to change the world. And the reason it's lawful bank is because we know there's got to be our own sort of form of money involved there to facilitate that energetic trade between us.
Yeah. Absolutely wonderful. Wow, Rik, what a wealth of knowledge, and so eloquently communicated with so much passion. You are truly inspiring. Thank you so much for the time that you have taken to speak with me today. And will you just remind people how they can find your work, how they can get in touch with you? So the Lawful Bank is one, and then you got your YouTube channel.
Yeah. So if you want to find anything by me, like Henna said, the biggest communication platform, we're trying to get off Facebook. We're trying to get off these corporate media platforms because we're serving the beast as long as we're using them. We're putting energy into their system, and we don't want to do that anymore. So yes, you can find me on Facebook. You can look for Fanfare for the Conscious or for Rik Parris. Find me on either of those if you want. But the best platform to contact me on is that lawfulbank.com. It will take some learning to use. It is because it's not got a lot of money behind it. It's fairly stripped down, fairly basic. We don't have millions of pounds to pump into it like a corporation would. So it is quite basic, but we do have, forums for communication. We've got a news feed, just like your Facebook group. You can add people as friends. You can join your local communities. There's all sorts of really interesting stuff on there. Worth taking a couple of hours on a PC if you can to have a proper dig, because there's so much functionality to it. And we just need the people to fill it. My YouTube channel, Fanfare for the Conscious. You can find me there. And I'm also trying to mirror it over to brand new Tube and to BitChute as well.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Rik.
No, it's been an
I'm looking
absolute
forward
pleasure.
to doing another powwow with you in the future, definitely. I feel there's so many subjects that we could dig into. Let's walk the talk, shall we?
Yes, definitely.